Afternoon, everyone. It's 1 o'clock, and welcome to the Coalition of Urban Serving Universities webinar series, which is part of the work of our Student Performance webinar. We're thrilled to have you here today. We've had about 85 people sign up, which is the highest number yet to date. We've done pretty well in our series for those of you who've been joining us throughout the year, but this is definitely the best. We're pleased to be looking at models for comprehensive student success initiatives, lessons from APLU's Most Visible Progress Award winners. What I'm proud to do is I'm going to introduce Dr. Irma Becerra-Fernandez, the Vice President for Engagement for Florida International University, who's here representing President Mark Rosenberg, who chairs the Student Performance Strand. She will be introducing our speakers for today. We have 3 wonderful speakers, and then she will be managing the question and answer section at the end. The speakers will remain muted. Note that in the corner of your screen there's a chat button. If you have any questions, just enter any questions you may have into the chat function, and Dr. Becerra-Fernandez will read them at the end of our event. Feel free to write down questions as they come to you. That's the advantage of having a chat button. It will preserve them over the time. And with that, welcome. And I'm going to pass the baton over to Dr. Becerra-Fernandez. Irma, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Galvanize, and thank you for the opportunity to introduce today's speakers. Today we will begin with a presentation from Dr. Timothy Rennick, who is the Vice President for Enrollment Management and Student Success, also Vice Provost and Professor of Religious Studies at Georgia State University. And since 2008, he has overseen the university's enrollment and student success programs. During this time period, the university has set records for the number and percent of underrepresented and Pell students that are enrolled, and increased its graduation rate by 11%. Georgia State ranks first in the nation in bachelor's degrees conferred to African Americans. Dr. Rennick received his doctoral degree in religion from Princeton University. We will then hear from Dr. Douglas Robertson. My colleague, Dr. Douglas Robertson, is the Dean of Undergraduate Education and Professor of Higher Education at FIU. He has been actively involved in numerous significant innovations in American higher education for 37 years and has over 28 years experience as an academic administrator. Dr. Robertson has been a tenured full professor at 5 universities and has extensive experience in faculty governance. Currently, he serves on the Steering Committee for General Education Reform for the state of Florida and is Vice Chair of the Council of Undergraduate Deans for the Florida State University System. He's an active consultant since 1970s. Dr. Robertson has provided over 150 trainings or consultations to a broad range of educational, healthcare, human service, governmental, and business organizations. He received his doctoral degree from Maxwell School at Syracuse University. And then we will have a presentation from Dr. Mary Beth Love. Dr. Mary Beth Love serves as Chair and Professor of Health Education at San Francisco State University. She has a long history of successful innovation in pedagogy and curriculum. Dr. Love has been the recipient of 4 prestigious grants from the Fund for the Improvement of Post-Secondary Education. Dr. Love's ability to carry out and foster community-based research and publications has resulted in the receipt of numerous state and national awards for innovative health curriculum and applied community-based interventions. Dr. Love is a collaborative leader with extensive local, state, and national partnerships. She received her doctoral degrees from the School of Public Health at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. So without further ado, I turn it over to Dr. Timothy Rennick.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tim Rennick from Georgia State University. It's a pleasure having you on the line today, and I'm going to talk in just a very brief period of time for about 15 minutes about some of the programs we've introduced at Georgia State and why they've made a difference. If you go to the first slide, you'll see one reason why we're all on the line today. This is national data from the New York Times representing the percent of Americans who hold the bachelor's degree, but it's disaggregated by economic quartiles. It captures the last 40 years, you can see going back to 1970, and what it shows is that there have been seismic shifts in the attainment of bachelor's degrees over the last few decades, but almost entirely the gains have been made in the upper half of the economic spectrum. That top 25% of Americans by annual household income, the numbers moved from 40% to over 80%. But for that bottom line, that blue line of lowest 25%, in 40 years, despite all our efforts and programs, we've moved the dial by 2 percentage points, from 6% to 8%. Clearly, if we're to attain the Complete College America and other sorts of goals that the Obama administration puts forward, it's going to be by succeeding with populations we haven't succeeded with previously, mainly low-income students. Next. This captures why Georgia State is part of this conversation. These are Georgia State's Pell numbers since the onset of the recession. The average Pell family in America makes $20,000 a year in annual household income, and that's the majority of students at Georgia State. 58% fall in the Pell category. Those would all fall in the bottom 25% of Americans. And there's another 30% of Georgia State students who fall in the next band. In fact, over the last 10 years, Georgia State has gone from about 40% of the population being non-white to 61%. Next. What we've tried to do, because we're not a well-resourced university, we're not a flagship, we have a small endowment, is try to use data very strategically to hone our efforts and to be able to determine where we're going to make the biggest difference. We've been aggressive about being early adopters of programs, but we've started them small with the caveat that we have to have a plan for scaling them up. We're not going to make a difference with programs that involve 40 or 80 or even 120 students. They're going to have to impact thousands or even tens of thousands of students at Georgia State alone to make a difference. Next. So what I'm going to do is talk about 4 programs. We have about 16 of these that we described as part of our MVP award application, but 4 of them to give you a sampling of the type of ways we're using data. One is trying to leverage one of the competitive advantages we have, which is lots of low-income students. We looked at the data for the freshman and sophomore courses in our curriculum that had the highest DFW rates, the highest failure rates, and then we looked at our work study rosters and found students, undergraduates, who are already funded by the university who did well in those very courses. Now we pull those students out of their current assignments in a library or answering phones in an office, and we pay them to go through training to be tutors. We pay them to sit in on the same class that they succeeded in previously, and we pay them to hold instructional sessions for fellow undergraduates. You can see the impact of some of the data on the screen in front of you, about a letter grade better performance for the student exposed to these programs. We've scaled this program up from the initial start with about 6 courses to over 20 different courses being covered by this program, and last year there were 10,000 students that benefited from it. Plus the tutors themselves have started to graduate at much higher rates. Next. We had a major problem, like many of your campuses probably do, with getting our students through their basic math requirement. 5 years ago, the DFW rates in those courses were amazingly over 40%, 43% of the students were getting D's, F's, and W's. We again piloted different models. We found the one that worked best was an Emporium model in which the students attend 1 hour a week of regular lecture with their instructor in a traditional classroom. The other 3 hours a week, they're in a dedicated math lab with their classmates. We found that was important to keep the classmates together and the instructor, but they're working on adaptive learning exercises. We use both Newton and Pearson products so that students will not fall behind. Students who are weaker can have more exercises in an area that will build them up to strengths and so forth. We scale, as I said earlier. So this past academic year, every single seat that we offered in college algebra, introductory statistics, and pre-calc were offered in this format. No traditional lecture seats available, and we have lowered the DFW rate in 5 years to about 21%. That's 1,600 plus more students who are passing the course their first time out. Next. We have engaged in financial interventions as well. A very simple program we introduced was at the drop period at every semester. In fact, we're about to hit it next week for the summer semester. State law requires we drop all the students who haven't paid 100% of their tuition and fees. What we do now is immediately after the drop, look at the list for the students with genuine unmet need and who are on track for graduation by our internal analytics that I'll talk about in a second. And we call them up and say, you know, we're going to cover your bill. Don't make other plans. We've covered the last $500, the last $600, and so forth. The last academic year. Over 2,500 students were brought back into the classroom via this program. The biggest group were actually seniors, and 70% of those seniors graduated within 2 semesters after receiving the grant. Next. The biggest initiative we've had in recent years is our total retooling of our advising systems. We were an early partner with the Education Advisory Board in developing their platform. We use 10 years of our own data, over 2.5 million grades. We update that every night. But the system is based on predictive analytics so that we can predict how every student will do in any major that we offer in many, many courses as well. And it hinges upon 700 alerts that can go off at any time for any student. Next. If you look at this slide, you'll see one example of the kind of alerts we have. This is actual Georgia State data showing the predictive value of the grade a student gets in the first course they take in what eventually becomes their major. So if you look at the center data, if a student's a political science major gets an A or B in their first political science course, they graduate at very good rates. They get a C in that first course, they graduate at a rate over 50 points lower than the first 2 groups. Yet the reality was Georgia State, like many other universities, was doing absolutely nothing after a student got a C in a course like this. They were waiting till they enroll in the upper level courses and begin to get D's and F's. Now we have these alerts going off right when the initial action happens, and we have a protocol for intervention so we can get this student help, tutoring, added coursework before they begin taking on coursework at an upper level that will lead to failing grades. Next. This is one student's page of the alerts going off, and what it shows is how often we in higher education are neglecting to do things that are within our power to help students. This was a pre-med student who entered before we went live with this current system. When we turned it on, we saw that the first semester he was doing everything wrong. He was supposed to enroll in a chemistry course. He didn't sign up for it. He was supposed to get a minimum grade in a math course. He got a grade lower than the minimum he needed to be on track. Yet at that time, we didn't intervene, and we waited, and as this student's history rolls out, by the time we turned the system on, there was no way to help him become a pre-med student, a successful biology major. We want to find a way to help the students right from the beginning and create more success stories. Next. This is the major matcher feature, a great tool for advisors. The student can choose any major we offer, and immediately in the grade shaded area, it'll show the courses the student has already taken that apply to that major, as well as the grades received. In the white area, the remaining required courses and the predictive analytics for how difficult that course will be for the student. So now, rather than a dialogue that takes place around, well, you're failing as a pre-med student, pick something else, there can be a structured and actually data-based conversation. The students find this extremely helpful. I've been very appreciative of having this kind of information in front of them. Next. In the first year we had this advising system going. It prompted over 33,000 individual visits. Students coming in to meet with their advisor in our central advising center. We moved over 2,000 students from courses that didn't apply to their major to courses that did apply during the registration period, and we used the tool in advising about 6,500 students. Next. Some of the early data is very encouraging. The trick with low-income, underrepresented students is not to have them pick a major early. It's to have them pick the right major early, a major that they're going to stick with and they're going to graduate with. And what we found is with the new system, more freshmen were thinking about their majors, changing their majors, and changing their majors to areas where the predictions say they will do better. Next. We also looked at this question of what % of Georgia State students under the new system improve their chances of graduating. You might like to think 100% do if they're registered, but if you're a biology student and fail a required course, you're not closer to graduating than you were before they took the course. You're further away. And what this chart shows is in the 2 baseline years, 11 and 12, only about 55% of our students were improving their chances of graduating during any given year. The first year under the system with those 33,000 interventions, that number went up markedly to 71%. Next. So all this has gotten us a lot of good attention. It was part of why we won this MVP award from the APLU, which is great. But next, If you look at this next slide, this is the real reason we're doing it. These are Georgia State conferrals over the last 5 years. We're now conferring 1,700 more degrees every year than we were just 5 years ago. We've had to move our graduation from the sports arena to the Georgia Dome where the Falcons play because we didn't have enough room. Over that same time period that we've increased conferrals by 30%, our overall enrollment, the inputs, grew by only 3%. So these programs make a big difference, as the next slide shows as well. Next. This is a comparison nationally of universities and the correlation between their Pell rates, the percent of their population on Pell, and their graduation rates. And what you see nationally, each of those diamonds represents a national university, is a very steep correlation. Graduation rates go down as Pell rates go up. You can see where Georgia State sits there. Among all our peer universities now, we have both the highest graduation rate and the highest Pell rate, which defies the traditional logic. Next. Here are graduation rates over the 10 years by race and ethnicity. The blue bars represent where we were 10 years ago, and what you can see is we were very typical. Poor graduation rates and an achievement gap where the white students were doing better than underrepresented students. The red bar represents where we are today. You can see all the groups have improved markedly from these interventions, but the students who were most at risk have improved the most, which is very gratifying. And then you'll also see with the green bar, these are the same students represented in the red bar tracked out, that same cohort tracked out using National Student Clearinghouse data across multiple universities. So even the students who are leaving Georgia State, and low-income students tend to be much more transient, they're succeeding where they land. A huge turnaround for these students. Next. So what's the overall result? This is my last slide. We are now in the top 100 for graduating Latino students. Georgia State is now number 49 in the nation for graduating Asian American students. And for the last 2 years, we've been number 1 in the nation for the number of bachelor's degrees we've conferred to African American students. These programs can make a huge difference. They can be life-changing for students, and they can really transform your universities as well.
Good morning. This is Mary Beth Love, and I'm here to talk to you today about the Metro Academies Initiative, which is an initiative for college completion and excellence and equity. I want to give great gratitude to Georgia State for the wonderful work they're doing, and I think we're in a very exciting time in higher education as we turn our attention to increasing college completion for those students who have typically been left out. Just a little bit of background as to repeat some of what our Georgia State colleagues said. We know that we have doubled access to higher education since 1978, but in fact our completion statistics have not budged in that same time period. So although we've been very successful at access, we are all now looking at what we need to do in order to raise the bar, turn the dial with regard to completion. And as Tim's data showed, that completion and who really we need to turn the binoculars on are the low-income, underrepresented, and often underprepared students that are in higher education today. We, like Georgia State, have found that since the recession, our Pell Grant numbers have gone from 32% of our incoming students at San Francisco State University to 46% of our incoming students. One of the things that we're excited about for the Metro Academy Initiative is that we are a program that spans the two largest sections of higher education in San Francisco in California that serves those students, both the community college system through City College of San Francisco in partnership with San Francisco State University. Next, please. Our mission in the Metro Academies is to increase equity in college completion through engaging, supportive, rigorous, and socially relevant education. Next, please. Ours is a redesign of the first 2 years of higher education for the students we serve, and we are a comprehensive program that provides a general education pathway for students in a Metro Academy. Each Metro Academy serves 140 students, and they spend 2 years working in a cohort where they are linked in 2 academic courses each semester for their first 2 years. And you can see in this graphic on your screen that we bring the students into the Golden 4, critical thinking, oral communication, writing, and quantitative reasoning. And then we have a set of core courses on the bottom, the first of which is a first-year experience. I'm going to talk more about this later, but what is important for you to understand in understanding our model is that it is a long duration pathway. All of the courses that are in our model are general education courses, and they are all career themed. So right now at San Francisco State, we are funded to go up to 13 Metro Academies, which means that we'll be serving 1/4 of all students at San Francisco State and getting very close to serving 100% of our low-income students. We also bring our student services into the academic classroom with counseling, tutoring, advising, early intervention, and personalized connection with other campus services. And we have a faculty development component where we are working with the faculty who teach these courses to bring the high-impact courses, practices into the courses with ongoing support and transforming their teaching practices. I would say the thing that distinguishes the Metro Academy is that we are in the core of the student's experience at San Francisco State or in higher education, which is their relationship with faculty and the development and strengthening of those core academic skills of writing, thinking, reasoning, and oral communication. Next, please. So we have recruitment pipelines, of course, and we do focus on bringing in low-income first-generation or underrepresented students into the program. It is aimed towards low-income students, and we ask those students to commit to 12 units in their enrollment at both the City College and at the 4-year institutions. So just to be very clear, we begin with first-time freshmen both in the community college and the 4 years. So we're at both campuses. It's not a 2+2. We have freshmen at San Francisco State and first-time freshmen at the City College. Next, please. So you can see this is data on San Francisco State, since I think most of the people on the line are from 4-year institutions. I'm showing you San Francisco State data, which shows you that our Metro students are different than our regular student population. Many more Latino students, as you can see. Next slide, please. And this, again, gives you some demographics of our San Francisco State students in general versus our Metro students. 83% of our Metro students come in needing double remediation. The majority of our students are low income, and the vast majority of our students in Metro are first generation. Next, please. So our pathway and the courses are general education, which means they meet the requirements for associate's and bachelor's degrees in both institutions. This is important because our pathways are career themed, so that if someone starts in our engineering pathway and doesn't think that that is the place, or we see, as with the Georgia State program, that they're not going to get through pre-calc. Nothing that they've done in Metro doesn't ring up to towards graduation, and they can move to another academy. An additional element of this general education course pathway is that all of the faculty teaching in this pathway through the faculty development process receive faculty development on how to teach, reinforce, and move students forward in their writing, critical thinking, math, and oral communication skills, and that in every one of those courses there are student learning outcomes that reinforce and help students get, help faculty teach units and reinforce the skills needed to move and catch up in that writing, critical thinking, math, and oral communication skills, the foundation of success in higher education. Next slide, please. We also bring the academic counseling, tutoring, financial aid, and early intervention are tied to courses. And like Tim mentioned in his program, we do use upper division students who have gone through the Metro program and have succeeded. We do a lot of near-peer tutoring, and also support for students. We use graduate students in our master's program in academic counseling to support and deepen our ability to do academic counseling, and we tie, every one of these courses has Metro program objectives, such as the students have to, for credit in these courses, submit a graduation plan every semester that's reviewed by an academic counselor and adjusted based on their success in the courses that lead to the major that they want to move to. Next. The courses are integrated, which means that the curriculum is integrated to systematically build strong academic skills between linked courses and across semesters. The curriculum is engaging and socially relevant with themes in broad fields such as health, STEM, education, early childhood, ethnic studies, liberal arts, credentialed teachers, etc. And again, this is using many of the high-impact practices. So the curriculum is built around solving real-world problems, and the students use themes, which means from their intended major, which means that we're pulling their career interest into their general education courses, and they begin thinking and writing and speaking and doing analysis around the theme, career theme that they're interested in, so that when they're in their oral communication course, they may be speaking about what it means to be a biologist and what they are going to do to make a difference in the world. We do use a lot of curriculum around social engagement and using your lifespan to make a difference in the world, tapping into students' enthusiasm and optimism for being change agents. And okay, next slide, please. The faculty development is a 45-hour faculty learning community where faculty are engaged in learning how, as I said, to teach those core academic skills, but also to support each other in using engaging practices in their classroom, and to get out from behind the lecture and to engage students in real-world experiences while they teach. Next slide. We have a tracking system where we're looking at dashboard indicators of success towards graduation. We also look at electronic portfolios and use electronic electronic portfolios to exhibit academic excellence and also to evaluate students' progress on those core academic skills. Next slide, please. As I said, we now have 5 metros at San Francisco State. We are moving to 13, and we have 2 metros at the community college in San Francisco, and we are also scaling up in that setting as well. Next slide. Our early data show us that at City College, our students are 9 times as likely to be prepared for transfer after 2 years versus a comparison group. Next slide. At San Francisco State, you see that our data every semester, and this is compared against all students at San Francisco State, which means that it's a conservative estimate because we're comparing against their more privileged peers. And the Metro is retaining students into the 7th semester at almost 20 points higher than regular students at San Francisco State. Next slide, please. And our 4-year graduation rate is significantly higher, again, compared to all students at San Francisco State. And our 5-year graduation rate is, again, projected to be significantly higher. Next slide, please. We have done a cost study at San Francisco State, and you can see from our data that our program is right now costing about $944 for 2 years, or about $500 per student extra per year. So we are a very low-cost program because we're in a public institution of higher education, and so we've been very conscious of the need to design the program in such a way that it is replicable and scalable in other institutions. And you can see that through students not churning and taking courses that they shouldn't be, and also because of our quickening of getting students to graduation, we are showing a cost reduction for the state in California at the CSU of close to $18,000 and at the community college of close to $23,000. Next slide, please. I want to conclude just by showing this graphic, which basically says that when the gears are not meshed, they are just a bunch of metal lying around, but when the gears start working together, they can speed the torque, power, and direction of a power source. Our students, almost everything that we are bringing to serve the low-income students that are progressing well with us already exist on our campus, and we are just refocusing, redeploying those resources and focusing them in a way that their torque is really put together to get more bang for our buck for the resources that we are already investing. Next slide, please. Thank you to all of our funders, and thank you all of you who are working very hard for the sake of our deserving students to help them get the degree that so many of them desire to and make a difference in their life. Thank you very much. Mary Beth.
Okay, great. Shall I begin?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll jump right in. We like to remind ourselves of this quote by Albert Einstein periodically. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So we really set about, I want to tell a story in just a few minutes here about the Graduation Success Initiative. Next slide, please. Which is really a transformation in the way that we administer the undergraduate curriculum We've had a major start, which I'm going to talk about, and some of the results. And then I'd like to talk about phase 2, where we're headed with it. But at the bottom of the Graduation Success Initiative is a very simple 4-point framework that really asks some very fundamental questions. And it goes across institutional type, and it also applies at large and small institutions. So it's really a framework for thinking about helping students to graduate on time. And I'll talk about our answers to these questions and how we went about it. But the framework, I think, is worth remembering, and different institutions will come up with different solutions. This is a slide that captures the context of Florida International. We're the 7th largest university nationally, 54,000. It is a public research university with a Carnegie designation, high research, and it's also engaged. 13%, only 13% of the students are white non-Hispanic, so it's 80% underrepresented minorities, and it leads in a number of categories that have to do with underrepresented minorities and Hispanics. It has a major access mission. 39% of the FIU undergraduates receive a Pell Grant. 64% of the bachelor's degree graduates in the 12-13 year were Pell recipients. Next. Next. Okay, when we began this, there were 3 stubborn facts. The first to second year graduation rate wasn't bad, or retention rate wasn't bad. It went from the mid-80s to the low 80s. Once in the major, the students graduated on time at a high rate, 77%, but the overall graduation rate was 41% right before we started the GSI, and it had been declining for a number of years. And that's in contrast to the public research university average of 54%. Next. So it was clear that there was this, using a regional metaphor, a Bermuda Triangle that the students were falling into, and some were never found again, and some came out in a delayed way. Next. So what we were trying to do is to change the cultural norm. A norm had developed at FIU of prolonged schooling, low on-time graduation rate. The student body president at graduation would make a joke that you knew you were an FIU student if you were starting your 8th year and you still hadn't graduated, and the arena would erupt in laughter. And so we're trying to, working with individual behaviors, build up a new cultural norm. Next. Next. So here's the results, and you'll see there's pre-GSI and post-GSI data that have to do with the first time in college on-time graduation rate. And we went from the historic low to the historic high. The first 3 years of the GSI produced a 12-point jump. Next. But perhaps even more importantly, we've made grounds on the norm, whereas in the last cohort, the 2008 cohort, we achieved the milestone of having the 4-year graduation rate be the largest of the 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduations. So we went from a 4-year graduation rate pre-GSI of 15% to 27%. Next. Next. This is an organizer to think about how we went about, or how we are going about transforming the institution. This cultural norm is a sort of a result of changes at the individual level. And on the left-hand column, you'll see the various elements in the system, if you will. And we're really looking at what each group has been doing, what we would like them to do, an appropriate intervention, and then to try to build reinforcements into the system that anchor the behavior, the desired behavior. Next. The GSI is a high-tech, high-touch approach. With regard to the advising overhaul that we've undergone, there are some very powerful technological tools that the advisors now have and the students have available to them. I'll talk about some of those, my FIU, my major match, my major, my e-advisor, and the Panther degree audit. But also we've invested significantly in hiring 69 new professional academic advising lines, filling them, and adding new ones and then filling them in 5 years. And now achieved the NACADA, that's the National Academic Advising Association, best practice ratio of 400 to 1. Very significantly, we've gone from a more passive, reactive drop-in model to a proactive caseload model. So every student at FIU is in a major and has a professional advisor. The advisors are held accountable to work their caseload, to reach out, to see how their students are doing, to shepherd them, to get involved, not wait for them to come in. The whole program and the whole initiative, the whole transformation has been very data-based. We have an in-house predictive analytics group which has 5 behavioral scientists that do nothing but work on our data. And we've developed a number of dashboards that feed back to the system how things are going, and people are held accountable to their performance in these dashboards. Next. Here's the 4-point framework. The first point is helping students to identify an appropriate academic major. You heard Tim talk about that at Georgia State also. We have a way of doing that, of helping them as early as possible, preferably at admission, to identify an appropriate major, one that fits their background, their abilities, their vocational interests, and their goals. Next is to provide them a clear path to get from here to there and an on-time graduation. Third is to provide them immediate feedback if they stray from their major map, their path. And we've built in-house a very powerful tracking tool. And then the fourth is to look at barriers in that path, remove them or reduce them, and to identify supports that would help and to add them. Next. 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 Okay. So one of the things that we tried to do is to, one of the things we did do was to turn the admission paradigm on its head, so that it used to be that students were admitted, they got some career development, and then they got their advising, and then they got their career development later. And we've really integrated career development and academic advising and put it as a part of the admission process. So when students come in, they take as a part of the admission process, required part, they take a 10-minute online vocational interest assessment, and they get back out of 79 different vocational pathways their top 5. And then we've customized that tool so that the FIU majors that go with those pathways are then shown, and then the student can click on them and go in and see what that major is all about. They'll see a 8-semester major map of exactly what they would take. And so the tool's no good if people don't use it. Well, in the little over 2.5 years that we've been using it, over 45,000, almost 46,000 students have used it, have used the My Major Match. The site that has the majors on it so that students can see what they're about and how they would, what the vocational interest or the occupational prospects are in it, and also what the major map is called My Major, has had in that same time period over 237,000 unique visitors who've made, as you can see there, 357,000 visits. But interestingly, when they're visiting My Major, they're actually spending a lot of time there. They're going to over 4 pages. The total page views are 1.5 million. They're spending on average of all of those over 3 minutes and 18 seconds. Those numbers are very large if you're used to tracking usages. Next. Okay, the tracking tool that we built in-house is called My Advisor. So students are given alerts if they are off track. There are lots of functionalities in My Advisor, and its usage has been just huge. In the period from November 2012 to just recently 2014, there have been like 785,000 visits with nearly 5 million page views. One of the unique features that I have not seen in any other tracking tool is that when a student gets feedback that they are off track and they should have taken something and they didn't, they can seamlessly sign up for the course immediately, and they see real-time sections. That I haven't seen anybody be able to do, and the advantage is they get the feedback on how to correct their behavior, and then they're able to do it right away. Next. Phase 2, this is, I believe, the last slide, is where are we going after this? We're focusing on those barriers. And one of the major barriers is gateway courses. Poor pedagogy on our gateway courses. We've identified 14 courses working through the Gardner Institute's Gateway to Completion program. We're one of 13 founding universities or institutions in that program. We've identified 14 courses that have high enrollments and high failure rates, and they have enrollments altogether of 29,000. So we're making interventions in high-impact courses to improve the pedagogy. And the second thing is that in our research with students, one of the major barriers for us, we did a survey of 8,700 students who are poised to graduate this last fall, and the ones that anticipated graduating said that the biggest barrier, 62% of them said, was having was course availability. And that was 62%. Financial issues were 31%, which is still significant. But you can see course availability is something that is in our power to control and do something about it. So one of the things that the My Advisor does is it's not only a good advising tool, but it's also a planning tool, because we can be able to predict how many sections we're going to need in which courses actually several years in advance. And so we need to build that tool, the course capacity projection instrument, so that chairs and so on will know how many sections they need, and then we can go about providing them. And finally, we want to expand the alert functionality of My Advisor. Right now it gives academic alerts. It does that very effectively. We would like to also build its functionality to include financial aid alerts, various scholarship opportunities, deadlines, and so on, where we can send out to this one portal these alerts to students that they would be eligible for this, did you know, the deadlines is this, and so on and so forth, and that would all be automated. And then internship opportunities, any internship that we can describe in PeopleSoft data points in our student information system, we can automate the alerts to students and so on. So that's it for me. I think we've got time for questions. I'll turn it over.
So the first question that I got was that will the slides be available after the webinar? And the slides will be, not only the slides, the full webinar will be available on the USU website. So I certainly invite you to check them out, not only for the webinar today, but for prior webinars, all on the topic of student performance. So let me ask our presenter from Georgia State, Dr. Timothy Rennick, if he can discuss any data that Georgia State has on the job outlook for the graduates from Georgia State? Do you have any information in terms of how the job outlook looks once the students are graduating? And perhaps, you know, what maybe percent of students that have a job within a year after graduation, or maybe something related to that?
People hear me? Okay, now they can. Okay, thank you.
Yes,
yes, this is Tim again. That's a sticky issue. We definitely have information of that sort, job employment data, collected by the traditional means that we have at our disposal, including our Office of Alumni Relations and so forth. I will add a caution here that you know, a lot of the data we're collecting nationally with regard to these sorts of issues is very selective and probably doesn't offer an accurate cross-section of the true data. Georgia, as a state, will not allow us to actually have access to objective records to actually track Social Security numbers, to get employment and tax records and so forth. So we are kind of at a loss there, which means that some of the numbers may be greatly inflated. But we have seen an upturn in the last couple of years. We're not crediting this to our student success programs as such in the Atlanta and Georgia economy, and the students are doing much better than they were a few years ago. But the greatest predictor of the income level of a student after college, and this is true not just at Georgia State, it's true nationally, is the income level of his or her family before he or she enters college. So my suspicion is that if we look across the institutions you're hearing about today, in San Francisco, in Miami, in Atlanta, we are not a cross-section of America as far as race, ethnicity, and economic backgrounds, that our students overall will not have the same income levels upon graduation as the flagships in our state, as the University of Georgia, Georgia Tech, University of Florida, Cal Berkeley, UCLA, and so forth. The question is not whether they achieve at comparable levels, but whether we're able to take them up through the process of post-secondary education to a much better spot than they would have been without us. And that I think, by that indicator, a lot of good work is being done.
Yeah, and if I may, Dr. Rennick, let me just add a little bit in terms of what we're doing at FIU, because we do have a performance indicator that we have to report to the Board of Governors that deals with what % of our bachelors are employed full-time or are continuing to graduate school a year after graduation. FIU right now is at 67%. Our goal is to continue to move that up. We are probably like one of the highest in the state of Florida, and that's reflective to a large extent that being a metro area, a lot of our students work, and they work part-time or they work full-time while they are also going to school. What FIU is doing to impact that indicator is that we're being a lot more intentional in helping students match them up with internship opportunities, because the research shows that when students partake on an internship, they're twice as likely to have a job upon graduation than if they have not participated in an internship before. So I really concrete and explicit effort to increase the number of internships and to guide our employers and even try to create an internship culture in Miami, which has not existed before, so that the community also helps us to identify internship opportunities as a mechanism to also retain our talent here. So I think in terms of impacting that figure, in terms of increasing the number of graduates that are employed full-time upon graduation, internships is probably one of the most impactful interventions. Okay, so the next question in this San Francisco metro case, Dr. Love, what are some examples of high-impact practices in faculty development?
Unmuted came on right in the middle of that question, so you can say that again, please?
Yes. In the San Francisco metro case, in your case, what were some of the examples of high-impact practices in faculty development?
So, for instance, we have a 3-day summer intensive for faculty where the faculty are taught, a high-impact practice is writing intense courses. So the faculty are taught how to talk about writing, how to grade writing. Another high-impact practice is the use of eFolio, and we do that. We also have the faculty who are teaching in the same semester, in those 2 semesters that are taught, to have at least one assignment where the that assignment is in both classes and they're integrating across disciplines. So that is another high-impact practice. We, of course, have the first-year experience. So we talk a lot with our students and really work with our the Metro coordinators. Every Metro has a faculty member who has some percentage of their time to oversee that academy, and that coordinator teaches the first-year experience, and they are taught about all of the various resources on campus and many of the things that we are well aware of now that go into a first-year experience course. I would say the other really important part, a high-impact practice that's integrated into the Metro redesign of the first couple of years for GE, is the peer support that comes from creating a homeroom for students through a pathway program where the students get to know each other. They feel a sense of belonging with each other. They have, they form study groups, they support each other, and they also have developed deeper relationships with faculty, and particularly with their academy coordinator, who really has their back, serves to as the point person for them in solving their academic and navigation problems through higher education, and also really serves as the early intervention system. If we know a student, that coordinator would know and gets feedback from other faculty about how the student is performing, and then they would intervene with the requirement that the student go for tutoring or enroll in a supplemental instruction class, which we provide for the courses that are those that students are most likely not to succeed in. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Love. Dr. Robertson, and everybody, this is a question that I'm going to direct to you, but also if anybody else wants to chime in. Initially, how were the students' reaction to these programs? I know that you had to create a culture change where students had to define their majors coming in. Did they embrace this idea, or were they resistant, or did you have to try to do something like give them like a free Starbucks so that they will participate?
No, that's a good question. The students have loved these interventions. FIU is a very large institution, 54,000 as I said, and what these interventions do is, the system does, is that it lets the student know that we're thinking about their success, we're serious about it, we're paying attention to them, and we're reaching out to them to check in with them to see how we can help. The response has been fantastic. They like that idea that somebody is looking after their welfare. They're not just lost here in this vast institution. And the technological environments that we've created are fun, and they like them, and it fits, you know, their generation, and they're used to interacting in them, and they find the tools very not only useful but fun to use. And these are all also available on mobile devices. We've made an effort at the institution. We understand the importance of making things that you can use on your phone, and that the whole package has been very well received by the students.
Yeah, Irma, this is Tim,
Excellent.
and we found the same at Georgia State, that we've polled by an anonymous survey every student as they're leaving our new advisement center and having been advised via these new technological systems, and the overwhelming majority have not only said that they appreciate it and enjoy it, but have asked why we didn't do this earlier. I think there's more of a faculty adjustment here. I mean, I've had some faculty say it seems kind of Big Brother-ish and maybe even a little creepy that we're tracking students day to day and we know what they did, and the next morning we're calling them up and telling them they signed up for a course that's the wrong course and so forth. And my honest response to that is it's not creepy what we're doing now, taking first-generation low-income students and not forcing their hand in any way, but proactively giving them the information they need to make wise and rational decisions. That's not creepy. What's creepy is what we've been doing for the past 40 years, which is increasingly, as Mary Beth pointed out, enrolling low-income first-generation students, throwing them into our big public universities with 20 and 30,000 students, with 100 different majors, with 1,000 different courses, and telling them to pick, and then being surprised when they don't get through the system in an efficient fashion. So no, I think what we're doing now is providing good information, and the students still have the power to make the decisions they want to make. They're just better informed decisions.
I think I'm just going to chime in here really quickly to that question because I think it's a good one. And I think in some ways it's a little bit of a paradigm shift for us in higher education to move from a model that is sort of you're here, prove yourself, to a you're here, your success is our biggest interest, and we know you can do it, and we are going to support you getting there. And I think that sense of belonging, that sense of I do belong here, this is the place for me, I can succeed here, is something that if you come from a privileged background and knew your whole life you were going to college because your parents did, you probably don't need that. But if you come from a background where your parents are very supportive, but they haven't done it, they don't know how to do it, and any of you who have been in this process, either with your own children or otherwise, know it is a very complicated set of hurdles to get into college, to get the financial aid things done, to get the courses that you need. It's huge. And so I think that when we all shift our paradigm from one of hands off, you can do it, to our biggest, our interest is your success. So it's subtle, but not very subtle. And when that happens, and I will just speak specifically for the Metro Academy, our students, it's a very rewarding experience to be involved in the project with both faculty and students. Our faculty report that having the opportunity as a non-writing instructor to know how to help students write better, they have felt very frustrated by caring about the students but not having the tools themselves to really make a difference in that crucial skill. And so I think, and for the students as well, that they have felt very supported and incredibly grateful for the help that they're getting to move forward, and the opportunity to experience what we all love so much in higher education, which is the world of ideas and the life of the mind. And that is what I think higher education provides for students, and when they're successful, they get the reward of that, and are really, as some of my other speakers said, it's life-changing, and as higher education should be.
Well, thank you. What a great way to end this session, Dr. Love. And I want to again thank Dr. Rennick, Dr. Robertson, Dr. Love, and our organizers at the USU, Dr. Galvanize, and the entire team for putting together this wonderful webinar. And we'll be coming back with more webinars. And I wish everybody a great weekend. And also thank you to our audience for tuning in today with us. Thank you all.
Thank you to you, Dr. Becerra Fernandez, and thank you everyone for also being patient for us and letting this go over in time, which is a pretty good sign of how well it went and how the interest was really drummed up and how people are really hungry for this information. So with that, I'd like to thank all our presenters, all our audience, and have a wonderful rest of the afternoon.